Hello, everybody. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here and absolutely thrilled to be talking about this new and exciting topic of cross-media measurement. Seriously, this is the 5th annual CIMM forum on this topic. And 5 years ago, when CIMM was created, with one of the two priorities, as Jane laid out, to focus on this topic, we knew it would be tough. But the good news is that we can be very hopeful these days. We have, Jane talked about competition, which I think we have today. We've got a room full of companies that are here today that are working in this space. We've got Nielsen, we've got ComScore, we've got Symphony, we've got TiVo, we've got RealityMine. And it seems like we are getting closer, and I hope we are, because I'm putting off my retirement until this thing gets done. Now, what's happened in the past 5 years, essentially, is that the business of buying and selling across media, because obviously the world has changed very dramatically. If you look at some of the data, particularly the data that's been shared by Nielsen with their total audience report lately, we could see the dramatic increase in different platforms that are being used in this country, and advertisers have to make use of those platforms. And so the buyers and sellers have been working on their own to fill the needs of their companies, to figure out how to buy and sell media across these platforms. And to that end, we have a terrific panel here today of gentlemen who are going to help us talk about what's been going on and how they are dealing with the business and measurement challenges of the current cross-media marketplace, particularly for TV and video. So we're going to try and focus on that more than anything else. So I'd like to introduce my panel here. First, on the far end, my far left here is Ben Jankowski, who is Group Head Global Media at MasterCard. And then next to Ben is Michael Strober, Senior Vice President, Client Insights and Innovation for Turner Broadcasting. Welcome, Michael. And then to my immediate left is Michael Piner, SVP Investment, MAGNA Global. Mr. Strober will now be known as Michael, and Mr. Piner will now be known as Mike. So let's get started here. So from your perspective, guys, let's start first with, and Ben, I'll throw this to you first, with what is the actual value of cross-media advertising? And can you then briefly outline for us, for this group, your approach to cross-platform measurement and audience-based buying or selling today? How are you dealing with that?
Sure. I mean, I think first things first, it's seminal to everything that we do. I mean, we don't work in a binary environment where we look at individual media, media in a bucket. Consumers don't behave that way. I mean, it'd be easy if it were that the case, but that's not how consumers consume media. So it is essential. It's the seminal thing that we need to figure out. So how are we doing it? It's a combination of and again, we haven't hung the mission accomplished banner on the side of the building yet. It's a journey, right? So we've done, on one path we've done trying to do things. We've done some work with traditional econometric modeling and trying to dig deep into trying to figure out which models work. We've done some attribution modeling. We're trying to do some some work with. We're trying to do as many test and learns as we can around innovation. And then on the other side of the coin, it's trying to get the right set of data, right? So, how can we find data that we can actually use that we can kind of cut across platforms? We're blessed that we have a great data set of our own information, MasterCard Advisors data, which we use for our project. So having a good solid piece of data obviously is important. And then we're trying to test and learn some of them big macro things like traditional econometric modeling projects, which have been really, really successful both in this country and in other parts of the world, as well as we're trying to do as many tests and learns as we can. And and everybody's sort of on that same journey of trying to figure out what works because it's the same conversation that we're all sitting in a room to talk about.
And it's still sort of a project, right?
Oh, absolutely. Anybody raise your hand if you figured it out.
I'm going to stick with the buyers and go to Mr. Piner next.
Yeah, I would say that it has tremendous value, and I think it remains the ultimate goal to be able to do all three. Cross-screen, cross-platform, to be able to plan, buy, and accurately measure, cross-platform campaigns. And I think the reason that is, and that we should strive for that goal, is because, again, here we are in April, right? And I'll just say it, we're faced with the same thing, advertisers paying more for less in linear TV. And I think if we're able to do cross-screen and do it effectively, I think we would be able to flip that around and pay less for more, potentially. So I think that is why it has the most value. And I think our approach to this is exactly like he said, is that being open to all these different measurement and sources and data sources enables us to buy with precision, like we never had before. And if we're able to buy with precision and layer that on, then that will enable us to unlock the additional value within media. So
Thanks. Now, Michael, as the seller here, Turner has sort of organized for this challenge, right? Tell us a little bit.
We are, and first of all, just as a minor correction, so I actually now have a new role, client strategy and ad innovation, which is actually a completely new group within Turner, just to your point, Artie, about ramping up and gearing for this new world. Our mission is to help reimagine advertising. And as a company, and no different than a lot of other media companies and brand marketers, we're singularly focused on the consumer and where that consumer wants to be entertained, where they want to collect their information, and watch their favorite videos. So it all starts with the consumer, and that's why I think when it comes to cross-platform, if you're allowing the consumer to access and enjoy their content wherever and whenever on whichever device, it's really important that we have the cross-platform standards, and I certainly applaud the coalition for doing that. We are now seeing an acceleration beyond just platform and devices now to other forms of buying and selling of media, largely around audiences. So now you're just compounding this proliferation of device and platform, and now a myriad of ways to access and buy content from the media companies. So we have been very aggressive in two products that we brought to the market about 3 years ago, all centered around audience targeting solutions. And these are, one of the products we have is called Targeting Now. The other one is Audience Now. And this is where we're given the opportunity for brands to purchase literally on audiences. And it's measured completely differently than the traditional Nielsen measurement. So we're very bold in terms of looking at new formats and ways to transact.
One other point, I think that one of the biggest opportunities we have as the world changes and we have more and more data is we need, moving from just looking at audiences and impressions, moving further to the funnel, moving closer to where things transact. I mean, and as a marketer, the only thing we used to have was impression data.
Right.
Now, as I'm getting closer to whether it's engagement, whether it's advocacy, whether it's actually, we're getting closer and closer to actually I can look at data, where people are actually purchasing my product. That's the holy grail, right? So I think that we're making so much progress in that space. It's we're moving closer to down the purchase funnel, and I sound like a dinosaur when I talk about the purchase funnel because people are like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. But one of the other benefits is we're getting closer to the moment of truth.
And I would actually add, I think it's even getting more challenging for marketers because there's so many other ways to access and market to a consumer. The consumer journey has to be recodified because it's not so linear and binary the way it has. So
it's not linear. I think it's still. I mean, there's still a consideration. It's but it all happens. It's almost like a spider web now, and not like a line.
Straight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's sort of, and I'm moving off the script here a little bit, but it sort of raises the topic that it's no longer, look, for 60 plus years, we had the benefit in linear television of having an end-to-end currency solution with Nielsen, and that clearly is not the case anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So Ben, you were just talking about there are all of these sort of different KPIs that you're looking for, but we still have to buy and sell, right?
Absolutely.
So this gets to the next question, and it's related to this, is there's clearly, as each day goes by, there's more and more that we don't know about how people are consuming media across platforms because we simply don't have the data. So from your perspective, and I'll throw this out to anybody who wants to start, what are the biggest knowledge gaps today, for example, as far as your business is concerned?
I mean, I think, it's like there's so many, not to sound like a downer, there are so many knowledge gaps. I think one of the biggest things is the mindset of the community that, every single part of the community is trying to find new metrics to differentiate themselves, when the reality, I think that consistency needs to be the most important thing, because I need to be able to make apples and apples comparisons. So the more I can find consistency across channels, and Jane started with some really good benchmarks of things that we have to watch out for, right? And that was a great list. But it's like we have to find consistency, because again, especially in the digital space, in the digital video space, everybody's trying to invent new metrics to make it's video views, it's a 2-second view, it's a 5-second view, it's a complete view, it's a shared view. I mean, if we don't find consistency, then we're going to fragment ourselves into more and more pieces, which is just not going to make our jobs any easier. So I think the biggest challenge that we spend the least time on is how do we find consistent measure that everybody can kind of wrap their heads around, so that marketers, sellers, buyers can all start to, we can actually try to, figure out what the right equation is.
Mike?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you're always going to need that foundation of consistent measurement. I don't think that it necessarily needs to boil down to just one. I think, but there's that kind of perfect balance between maybe a few at the end of the day, and then on top of that, being able to overlay these just tremendous amount of data sources that we have to overlay that, but having that one foundation on audience across everything, I think would be incredibly helpful.
Right, so that's where kind of the challenge is at its highest, right? We want that consistency in terms of measurement, and one of the gaps, of course, is clearly just understanding what the reach of your campaign is at the end of the day,
absolutely.
right? Because reach is becoming, quickly a rare commodity.
Yep.
So how do we maintain that consistency at the same time? We'll get into big data in a moment, but you want more of a consumer audience solution, and so do you.
Right.
So Michael, what's your response to that?
I mean, we're trying to address that, and certainly, I think in the last few years, you're starting to see so much more attention being put beyond just the traditional, age, gender, demo guarantees, and new ways to connect a marketer's message to the consumer by digging into the different data, both attitudinal and behavioral data sets that are now becoming more available and matched back to TV or media consumption in ways that we really haven't had, I'd say, deeply in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think that's a big thing. Getting back to your earlier question, though, I do think as the seller on stage, for us, the big knowledge gap is really if we are a video media company and we want to put our content in front of viewers wherever they want to consume that, it's still hard for us to measure and then monetize that and model our inventory accordingly. Obviously, we're doing it with the interest of helping the client connect to their consumer, but for us, that is still a huge gap and causing a lot of tension internally just to figure out what is the right go-to-market strategies.
And so you're saying the simple gap is what's my audience?
That's exactly right.
How much is there? So, okay, so we've got Nielsen and ComScore in the room. They'll be up here later. Nielsen is rolling out its total audience measurement service. They probably think it's more advanced than it is right now. ComScore, with the acquisition of RentTrack, is now a formidable competitor to Nielsen, and I've mentioned a few of the others, but those are the two big ones in the room today. And they both have the ability to fill in that one gap in terms of where's my audience, where's ESPN's audience. We have the same sort of issue. But knowing what you know about what they are capable of, Nielsen has done a good job of letting us know exactly what's going on in terms of their total audience approach, but of course we also know that measurement now is a team sport. Both of these companies are going to be highly reliant on us, MVPDs, and other providers for solutions, but we're close. And knowing that, what they can do, what does this mean to you and how you may be doing business in the next few years?
Well, I mean, I guess I could jump in first. I mean, we are evaluating both of those companies' offerings and certainly want to help contribute to moving and advancing the industry forward. I mean, it's clearly in our all collective interest that we find these solutions. And so we're going to still be very aggressive where we need to and help try to move us in a direction where I think ultimately our clients are asking us to go.
I thought it was great news when I first heard it, and obviously I think it was kind of funny. They were announced at similar timing in the fall. Both of these things were announced, and kind of it led you to think, which one was first, and was the competition reason for one announcement over another? But I think it doesn't really matter. I think competition is good. And like I said, we shouldn't be relying on one single source for that foundation for measurement. So I think it's a good thing, and anxious to hear. I know they're speaking later today more about it, and very encouraged by what I've seen and read so far from Nielsen. So yeah, overall, I think it's a good thing, and competition is what leads to progress and leads to progress quicker. At the end of the day, it could turn out that these are complementary and not so competitive. So we'll see what happens. But
The two companies are complementary.
yeah, they may end up being complementary to each other, especially when we talk about buying across screens, right? So they could end up being complementary. We might prefer to use one over another depending on what we're looking to measure and what results we're looking for. So, yeah.
Ben, point of
I
view?
mean, for me, it's please hurry, because it's like we're and I think get back to the point earlier about technology advances across the top of the funnel is still progress. I still have an environment where I've got a CFO who is like prove to me that advertising works. So I mean, the more we can get to the bottom of the funnel, and what I've seen from the research so far, and again, you guys spend more time with it than I do. It's still kind of top of the funnel and helping us understand audiences. And again, it's huge progress, and that's great. We got to figure out how do we pivot quickly into how does it help us drive engagement, advocacy, and ultimately, get people to figure out which of my customers are using their cards more. Because I'm sorry, go ahead.
So go ahead, but just to building off of that, I think when we sit with clients, largely what we hear is the same thing, getting closer to the point of sale. Help me understand the impact of my advertising, more so than moving away from a model of efficiency to a model of effectiveness.
Well, it's efficiency of a different metric.
Right.
It's efficiency
That's
of
exactly right.
cost per sale, or in my case, we're driving revenue rather than a cost.
The value per person.
Yeah.
So I think then we're kind of in agreement that it's important that there's some third-party standardized approach to measuring across platforms and understanding things like reach. But ultimately, though, will the scaled approach of big data across platforms in the long run replace existing audience measurement and age, gender, demographics, or is it going to continue to be sort of a hybrid approach, do you think?
It has to, at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a hybrid. There's still too much of the business that's transacted on age, gender. I think we're all working to a point where we could have a variety of ways to transact, but I still think it's going to be a combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, we're always going to need that foundation of measurement across the bottom. But I think what we're finding, and we're finding it in small amounts already in linear TV, is that if we're able to use these multiple data sources and overlay them on this measurement, that we may not need in certain cases where we want to be very precise and target specific custom targets, that we don't need age, sex, gender. We can just rely on total viewership or households.
Okay.
So I think that's possible.
And we're going to come back to that topic in a second. The one thing, though, from a publisher perspective, a media perspective, and Michael, I'd be interested in your point of view on this, is that we have to also understand that just like Nielsen has been for the longest time, ComScore has been the third-party source of insights on the digital side. When you're on the publisher side, you need that sort of insight, that measurement to truly understand your audience in the first place, right? Ben's in the business of establishing more usage of his card. We're in the business of growing our audience, and we can't lose sight of that at the end of the day. But let's move on to the question of data right now. And Ben, I'll throw this to you first. How are you using data today to connect with customers across platforms? And when we had our phone call to prepare for this, you talked a lot about the quantitative and the qualitative aspect of data, and perhaps a storytelling approach. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
So I mean, we've done if you kind of break it into the sort of the quant and qualitative side. The quantitative side, it's relatively traditional. Again, we're blessed with a lot of our own data that we have. So we use a lot of that in the first party, and it helps us drive all of the quantitative things that you'd try to get into in terms of and again, we've through partnerships that MasterCard Advisors has done with the media community, a lot of that stuff can plug in. We can do segments, right? We're not going to go down to the individual level because it's principally because it's against the law, and we like to I don't want to end up in front of an FCC commission or in front of my, in front of my boss. So, it's segments, it's not individuals, but I mean, we are getting into, we have the ability to, segment data and plug, usage of card data into, traditional media. So whether it's Rentrack, whether it's, all the other sources that MasterCard Advisors is plugged into. So we have that ability to be able to do the quantitative side. The qualitative side is kind of the more, not the more interesting side, but the more, probably a little bit ahead of the curve, where we've actually gone from, using data to, social, around social listening, to understand what people's interests are, right? So we're very steeped in trying to be contextually relevant, because we're in the business of, we're trying to motivate and inspire people to use their card. If I can, so we've kind of focused around 8 passion points, right? One, sports, raise your hand if you're not into sports or music or travel or family, or, I mean, all the obvious things. I'm a sports guy. If you get me to use my card when I'm going to Yankee Stadium, and it's a good example because we sponsor the Yankees, but I'm a Phillies fan. That's a whole other misery. So, but if you use my card whenever I go to Yankee Stadium, when you use my card for everything else. So we've taken the data around social listening, and I said, I know that I've asked Ben to, to contribute, and I've kind of captured Ben through some social media. Now I've captured him. I understand he's a Yankee fan. If I deliver him a Yankee message, as opposed to Artie, who's, a food fan, or Michael, who's a travel fan, and deliver them, a travel message or a food message, we've done a lot of research, and the value of that is contextual relevance in some of the tests that we've done have increased the value, and value we've defined as making consumers, go to our customer sites, has improved the value of the advertising by 125%. And that's like, that's obviously, that's a big deal. So how we can take that data to do more qualitative, help us be contextually relevant. And that spins into, in pretty real time. So we've done some tests, not so much in America, but we've done in some other markets where we've gone from learning about what Artie wants to, where Artie wants to travel to delivering him an offer for the place he's talking about traveling to in the span of 12 hours. So we're trying to do it in as real time as possible, and that again has shown the efficacy of that has grown. We're 125% more effective than we were back when we were just doing traditional messaging and things like that. So that's really exciting.
And Mike, talk a little bit about how Magna is using data, and especially when you're working with companies like Turner, ESPN. Where does big data come in?
So big data, I mean, obviously there's a tremendous amount of it, and we're incorporating it into our data stack that we have at MAGNA Global, like everyone seems to have nowadays, and basically ingesting all of that into our planning systems. And I think that part of it has advanced pretty well. Our tools and systems for planning. I think where we need to advance further, I think, is connecting the buying and then measuring the results, and seamlessly doing that cross-channel. So I think, and using that data to do that, which we're advancing as well. But I think we've gotten very good at using the data to plan out. I think that it's the next 2 steps that we need to advance.
Do you have any concern, or how do you sort of ensure the quality of the data that you're using to make these big dollar decisions?
I think that it takes a tremendous amount of time and manpower to do all this, to vet all these different data sources, and to verify them for methodology and measurement. And so not all data is good data. Just because it's big doesn't mean it's good. And are we able to extract the insights that we need out of that data is most important. Is most important for it. But there's a tremendous amount that's available. There's new companies and sources being announced every day. So it's a lot to go through, but we have a tremendous amount already that we're using, and we're combining it with what we know already about audiences through companies like Nielsen, and being able to actually have a tremendous amount of success targeting with precision and buying audiences. I think, like Ben said, I think we have to keep in mind with that, because we're advancing into this direction very rapidly, is contextual targeting and contextual relevance. And I think that's being brought on board right now as we speak as well. I think that's always going to be important when it comes to putting messages out there for our advertisers. Yeah.
How are you evaluating that right now, the value of context?
I think we're always evaluating. I think that's where it really starts. I mean, I think that, buying with precision is just like the next step in buying. I think the campaigns that we do for our advertisers are really rooted in contextual-based targeting that we've done for years, right? And so I think that that is really the basis for the buys. And then buying audiences and buying with precision then is like the engine that makes it move forward. And actually, you're able to extract more value that way because you're able to target those specific audiences that you know are going to convert, are going to lead to a purchase, or are going to lead to whatever. And in my mind, I always compare it to, it's political season, and it just works for me, but I compare it to government spending randomly. So it's like if you eliminated all the waste and fraud in government spending, then we might be able to actually fix the roads, pay the teachers, pay the firemen, and everything, right, without raising taxes. So kind of works for me.
Mike Piner for president. Michael?
So the way we approach it slightly differently. I mean, we, about 3 years ago, even less than that, I'd say, we initiated our DMP, Turner Data Cloud. And largely that was just to start to have a repository where we could keep a strong identity of our audiences. And as we're building that out, what we realized too is that it's not just only going to be for that. There's other modalities that we are focused on. For instance, content and experiences and how they come in. So we want to understand the audiences, we understand the content, the experiences, and the last area I would say we want to think about is more on the devices and how they consume time of day. So all of that rolled up together is the context. And so if we can start to paint a clearer picture of that individual across those modalities, think about the opportunities that can then provide a client when they're trying to think about how to reach the consumer at the right time with the right message at the right frequency. I mean, that's where I think over time, as we think about big data and appending that to the data cloud, that's the opportunity we see in front of us.
So clearly what we're arriving at here is that the whole concept of multimedia buying, selling, planning, evaluation has so many dimensions to it at the end of the day, right? And we're leveraging all these data assets that we have. We still need core measurement. I want to get back to the Nielsen ComScore question because they are all both panel-based, right? And which means there's got to be some value to that at the end of the day, right? And before I get back to the final question, I just want to give the audience an opportunity, if there are any pressing questions for this panel, if you want to raise your hand, scream, yell, clank some silverware, we can do that. Otherwise, yes.
I could actually hear you.
Otherwise, I can hear you and I could play.
We could hear you. So.
We could hear you.
Okay. I was curious on the subject of verification. Everybody was very enthusiastic about consistency. But if each supplier verifies their own information and there's no cross-verification, isn't that pretty much the equivalent of the fox guarding the henhouse?
Yes.
So Janice is asking about the consistency of verification and the issues associated with, I guess, different modes of verification. So, Ben, you want to?
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's part of the consistency is you have to be able to, not that we don't trust, people with their own first-party data, but obviously you have to find some standards to be able to verify. So again, it's, a little bit removed from marketers, role in sort of the specifically the media research ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, you have to find the consistency.
But is anybody even working on that? We make all of these assumptions about the efficiency of one product versus another, or one set of ratings or qualitative information versus another. But if people aren't using the same identifiers or the same methodology for computation, then it's not a fair comparison at all, which makes the results bogus. So where does it stop, and when does somebody
Who wants that one?
Well,
Well, I think that's why we're all here.
and we're going to
right?
have
Yeah.
George Ivey up later on, who maybe can address that. And I think it's a great question about who's looking over this, who's going to drive this. And I think first we need, and it's an issue because in terms of just validation and things like that, viewability. We have a standard, but then we sort of push the standard a little bit. There are variations on that standard. So it is a big industry issue, and we look forward to hearing from the MRC on that.
There was a question in the back, I think.
Easier question.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that we have to keep up, right? We have to keep up, and I think that this stuff is moving faster, and that's what's forcing us into this quicker.
Colleen?
Hi, this is for Ben. You were talking about how, well, I think we're all talking about that there are different media companies coming up with different ways to target audiences, and Turner's is proprietary to them, and Viacom's is proprietary to Viacom, et cetera. And obviously that's, you want to be able to compare the efficacy of campaigns across those different approaches, but the likelihood of those approaches being standardized in the next couple of years is pretty low. So do you think that you could find a way to actually allow there to be different proprietary solutions coming from different companies and for that to somehow work for you?
Like in our case, and again, every market is unique. In our case, I can do, again, because we have because we're fortunate to have the data, have a lot of we don't have every single piece of data that we need. We have a tremendous head start. I can do a test with Turner and with NBC and with NBC, Comcast, sorry, and with Discovery, and I can test the back end, the bottom of the funnel. I can test the bottom of the funnel in terms of which plan drove sales results better. And again, that's a benefit that we have because we have the great data. And of course, the Turner one will obviously be better, right? Right. So in my case, I think there's enough information out there that most marketers can probably. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if it really revolves around how much revenue I drove, how much sales I drove, whatever your business metric is, I think at the bottom of the funnel, you could find the consistency. If you found the same data set to be able to measure, I think you could solve that. Even though, they are different, slightly different models, and they're kind of skinning the cat in slightly different ways. At the bottom of the funnel, I can measure results, consistently with different pieces of data. So I'd be confident that I could do that.
If I could just jump though, on that, I think two things. To the earlier question, to what Artie said, I think this is going to be a team sport, and there needs to be a lot more cooperation in terms of getting to these level of metrics and measures. I would almost say beyond just, I think MasterCard is in a unique position given the data and the access that they have to information that maybe other brand marketers don't have.
It's available, though. I mean, it is available.
It is, but not the first party data is for a CPG is not as easy, I would say.
You're definitely right.
One of the things though that I think even before you go on the sort of the attribution side to it, even there's a varied approach to how we decision and do the analytics to identify which audiences are. So we could all be using the same data sets at the media companies, but there may be a completely different way they identify which audiences should be selected. And so I think there needs to be some consistency in helping the agencies and the marketers understand that at least we're looking at it from a similar approach. A lot of the solutions that we've seen in the market right now rely on historical indices. And what we've learned in our research is it's not the best predictor of the future. And most of this industry right now is building audience targets off of historical indices that are not accurate. Television right now, until it's an IP-based delivery mechanism, it is a futures market. And we need to think about audiences today, tomorrow, next week, next quarter. And nobody has cracked that code. We've worked on it. We have a solution that is different than what's in the market, and it does predictive estimates for audiences. It's the best we've seen so far. It could be better, and we need the industry collectively to work to make that so that at least on the front end, we're at least singing from the same song sheet, and then we could tackle the back part on the attribution.
All right, so with the last minute or so, we have, zero time, but in very quickly, our last question, your opinion, what's your desired future state of cross-media measurement in the next couple of years?
I think, like I said before, I think just getting it down to a couple or a few, cross measurement audience measurement solutions would be terrific, and then being able to overlay these multiple different data sources on top of that and verify them and normalize them for methodology and accuracy and whatever. So.
Thanks. Michael?
Measure every person that watches my show. That's it. And then for every marketer to spend a lot of money against that person, and I'll be happy.
That sounds reasonable. I mean, for me, I mean, it's understanding, in a consistent manner doesn't mean a single, one methodology manner. In consistency across, the different parts of the purchase funnel, so that we can, measure, all the different forms of success that we have to get to.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.